The Workers' Party Manifesto 2025 is titled Working for Singapore. It sets out our vision for a more resilient, inclusive, and democratic Singapore. It contains 125 policy proposals across 5 key areas aimed at improving the lives of all Singaporeans. We begin with the concrete steps to tackle cost of living pressures, from making utilities, housing, and care more affordable, to proposing alternatives to the GST and enhancing support for retrenched workers. Next, we focus on economic growth and opportunity. Our policies aim to strengthen the Singaporean core in the workforce, uplift SMEs, and prepare workers for future industries through affordable reskilling and CPF reforms to boost retirement adequacy. The third section is about building a fairer society. We call for better social support for families, caregivers, seniors, and those in poverty, and for a more inclusive planning that gives everyone a real chance to thrive. Fourth, we make the case for deeper democracy and stronger accountability. We propose institutional safeguards to check power and reforms to our electoral system, including lowering the voting age to 18 and returning to single-member constituencies. Finally, in a more uncertain world, we offer ideas to strengthen Singapore's security, from countering grey zone threats to boosting NS pay, to securing our digital and physical supply chains for food, medicine, and essential goods. This is our plan for a fairer, more secure Singapore, one that works better for everyone. This is our plan for working for Singapore. We have just launched the manifesto on our website. You can now access it at wp.sg/manifesto. Some of you would have this card with you. And there's also a PDF version to download, but I will invite everyone to try out the web and mobile-friendly version that has filters that allow readers to zoom in on the proposals that matter most to them. We hope that this will make it more easily accessible to Singaporeans and that more of them will take the time to read the proposals that are important to them. Now my colleagues, Associate Professor James Lim and Ms. Herting Roo, will take you through some of our key proposals in each section, and I will wrap up at the end.
Thanks, Jarl. First, let me extend that welcome to everyone here as well, at lunchtime no less. For what it's worth, for those of you that are heading on toward lunch after this, I recommend duck rice at Lorong 35 or Hokkien mee at Lorong 29. Now, what my job here is to address chapters 1 and 2 on, respectively, the cost of living and on growth. For this purpose, I think it's useful to also reframe a little bit what these two mean in the context of something that weighs heavily on all our minds, which is the ongoing trade frictions worldwide. The party has already released a statement on this issue, and the thrust of what was captured there were policies that we think matter both inward as well as more outward oriented. And these would help households as well as businesses. Now, what this means, translating into these first 2 chapters that I'm dealing with, is a greater degree of social protection to help Singaporeans to cope with cost of living, and also to seize economic opportunities. So let me touch on 2 in chapter 1. Here, what we believe is that there is a necessity for greater support for addressing job insecurity in this uncertain economic environment via redundancy insurance. Now this is, to be clear, not entirely dissimilar in spirit to what was released by the ruling party in the JSS, 6-month support as well as incentives for job search. Now, to be clear, this is also common across unemployment insurance schemes all around the world. But we think that there are nuances, and these nuances are important. For instance, we believe that replacement should be up to 40% of median income, which comes up to around $2,000 a month. At the same time, we also believe that this should be front-loaded over a 6-month period rather than equally spaced out. And there's good economic research to support this kind of front-loading for creating greater incentives to look for jobs. And finally, I think what is perhaps most important is that we believe that these should be funded by worker-paid insurance premia. Now, this, we believe, makes it more sustainable and also ties beneficiaries much closer to the contributors rather than to the general taxpayer. Now, relatedly, we also believe that retrenchment benefits should be mandated, as they aren't right now, and this should start with both small and medium-sized firms. Now, a second thrust in the first chapter is an importance of making housing more affordable. Essentially, what we try to address is what we believe is an irreconcilable conflict between asset price appreciation and housing affordability. We believe that the target should be a house price to income ratio that is much closer to 3 rather than what is currently prevalent. We also believe that this process will enable an orderly transition, and the way that we can ensure that this orderly transition occurs is to have a universal lease buyback scheme. This is the way that this scheme would work would be such that we would have a buyback with rational pricing consistent with what would be implied by Bala's curve. Now, as an aside, what this also does is that it frees up a stock of readily available housing that could be used for short-term purposes, and this would be rented out at rates somewhere between what is the market commercial rate and prevailing HDB rental rates. Now, turning from offense, if you will, to, from defense to offense in addressing these global trade frictions, we believe that there are also policies that will help Singaporean workers as well as businesses address growth in the long run. So first, we believe that there should be a need to prioritize local hiring and reduce a dependence on foreign talent. For this, we believe that one important policy is to tie employment passes to skills transfer. So employers would be required to demonstrate skills transfer, which in turn will be tracked, monitored, and reported as key performance indicators that is in line with the industry transformation roadmaps. In the medium term, of course, what we need to do is to better align or realign our school curricula with industry needs. And this is especially for jobs that are already listed on the MOM's shortage occupation list. Admissions into programs can be made such that they would allow Singaporeans to enter as long as they meet minimum entry standards instead of relative performance. And this would remove what we think has been a consistent excuse of local talent shortage. Finally, I think we can do more to help our SMEs internationalize and to exploit the opportunities that are inevitably going to come up in our backyard, especially in the region like ASEAN. Surveys continue to show that small and medium enterprises face challenges in terms of access to financing. So here we think a long-standing Workers' Party proposal of supporting an export-import bank with a focus on digitization, sustainability, and Industry 4.0 projects will help go a long way to helping our firms and be competitive in this new unfolding economic environment. So on that, I'll pass it on to Ru.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, everyone. I will today cover sections 3 and 4, which deal with first, inclusion and equality, and next, accountability and democracy. On inclusion and equality, the Workers' Party believes that apart from strong economic underpinnings, our approach and policies must put the twin principles of inclusivity and equality front and center. Policies to promote inclusion and equality have to take center stage, especially as global shocks, such as the COVID pandemic and various wars, have been shown to exacerbate discrimination and inequality. To start us on this quest, we believe that we need a formalized way to track social outcomes and development beyond GDP. Our historical focus on GDP growth as a measure of policy success has to evolve to be supplemented by measures that track our country's social outcomes and development, such as measures of both income and wealth inequality, and our health, climate, and sustainability goals. These breakdowns can also be a first step to better understand our progress beyond just top-line figures of how much we spend in each area. The voices of Singaporeans must be taken into account, not just what the government believes is adequate for Singaporeans, but what Singaporeans themselves report are essential in measuring our country's success going forward. This section thus contains various policy proposals from the Workers' Party to further our aims in working towards a country that gives everyone the best chance to flourish, whether it's through repeating our calls to establish an official poverty line or to enhance our preventive and mental health care systems to best support our citizens to thrive. As our demographics change, so too does the burden on unpaid carers. To alleviate this, we call for enhanced support for family caregiving, with specific proposals of 6 days of paid leave for those who care for elderly parents or family members with disabilities, and to extend childcare leave to a per-child basis. For education, we also call for a strengthening of our learning environment, repeating our calls to reduce class sizes, to allow teachers to provide more personalized attention to students, to facilitate the teaching and nurturing of every child. Many of our proposals in this section also aim to broaden our education system to be more accessible to those with extra needs or from vulnerable backgrounds. Other proposals contained in this segment include improving access to housing, improving the work environment, and setting up a local sporting system for sporting success. Moving to Section 4, Accountability and Democracy. As a democracy, our governance system here in Singapore believes in the will of the people. You, our voters. And a key part of our democracy is to ensure that accountability goes beyond holding elections every few years. We must have institutional systems that not only check those in power, but must also ensure that these institutions are empowered to do so with full independence. This section is particularly important in times of uncertainty and change, because a bedrock of accountability and democracy has to stand firm and be a beacon of light to guide our nation through turbulent and even dark times. Our 2025 manifesto contains various proposals that we believe will achieve this. Many of these proposals remain unchanged, and some of these, such as proposals to introduce freedom of information legislation and declassifying national archives after 25 years from the date of record to ensure greater transparency and better understanding of our history, are not new. We also repeat our call to lower the voting age to 18 in order to enfranchise younger Singaporeans to meaningfully participate in civic life earlier, especially given that 18-year-old Singaporeans already are entrusted to bear arms for our country and to take on the fiduciary duties of a company director. This change will bring us in line with most other countries, given that Singapore is only one of 8 countries in the world with a minimum voting age of 21 or older. The manifesto also contains a number of proposals for entrenching safeguards to protect our public institutions, to enhance judicial oversight, and improvements to policing. This year, we also have proposals relating to oversight on efforts to conserve the environment and to stamp out discrimination in all forms. 10 years ago, during the launch of the Workers' Party manifesto for the 2015 general election, I said that our system of governance has to work to underpin a resilience for our country to move forward towards SG 100 and to determine our children's and their children's future. Today, I believe that the uncertain world that we live in means that these principles are proposals that are more needed than ever to achieve our aims to continue to work for Singapore. Thank you.
Section 5 deals with security and geopolitics. National defense is the core responsibility of any government, and that underpins our national resilience. WP supports maintaining and building up a strong military to protect our nation's sovereignty and security. We call for stronger countermeasures against grey zone tactics. Some of these measures include enhancing information resilience through integrating critical thinking into school curricula and national service training to counter disinformation efforts by foreign powers. We also call for full-time national servicemen's median allowances to be raised to a median wage of $1,600 a month, and for the term NS allowance to be changed to NS salary to better reflect the contributions and sacrifices that our young men make. Strengthening internal resilience also means strengthening our food security. We should increase local farm uptake of locally produced food by major institutional buyers like the SAF, public hospitals, and prisons. This would promote the market viability of local farmers and enhance national food security. So that is a wrap of our manifesto overview. I want to take this opportunity to thank all our MPs, members, volunteers, coordinators who put in so much hard work in the background to put this manifesto together. This was a labor of love for us, and we are grateful to be able to take this next step of putting forward proposals to make for a better Singapore. We invite Singaporeans to read our manifesto in its entirety and assess for themselves if the policies that we proposed are able to take Singapore forward. But these are just ideas. Ideas need a voice to advance them in Parliament. We ask voters in the constituencies that we contest to make us your voice. Let us work for you and work for Singapore. And now I'll be happy to take any questions. Yeah, Pei-Ting. Yeah, we'll just
Okay. So it seems like there's several overlaps to the past manifesto. I just wanted to know what are the key differences and tweaks to earlier positions that you will on.
Sorry, I think a bit is short. No, it's not. Just hold present. No, it's not a.
Yeah, I would just ask the question. So there are several overlaps, that of course we can tell from the manifesto which we have just presented. Right? So what are the key differences and tweaks for these decisions to deal with the new challenges in today's world? And of course, PM Wong just released a PAP manifesto, and he spoke about how the stakes include Singapore's interests having to be defended on the global stage, and how the nation has to navigate stormy weather to secure lives and livelihoods. So what do you think of PM's message, and how should voters relate that with deputies?
Okay, I'll answer first. Well, our manifesto has essentially grown with us. In 2020, we didn't have so many MPs in Parliament, and there was an unprecedented number of opposition MPs from the Workers' Party who was elected in Parliament in 2020. And so this gave us the opportunity to not just talk about our manifesto, but bring it forward in Parliament and have a lot of these, the questions or a lot of the proposals in our manifesto actually debated in Parliament, tested, put through the fire of debate. And what we have today is a refined version, an enhanced version of the manifesto that we had in 2020, where we build upon the proposals that we had raised in 2020. And some of them, you will find them, they're still there. The reason why they're still there is because they're not implemented yet. So we want these proposals to be implemented. We're not just dropping them just because they weren't implemented by the government. And this is our plan forward, to bring forward these proposals in Parliament if we have the opportunity to. And we hope that Singaporeans will give us that chance to be able to speak up for them, not just in a few constituencies, but in all the constituencies that we're contesting in, that they can give us a chance to raise these proposals in Parliament and debate them with the office holders, and more importantly, for Singaporeans to hear the proposals so that they can also assess for themselves whether this is a better plan forward for Singapore.
Okay, maybe I'll just quickly address the point that you made earlier about PM Wong's earlier, I guess his message to voters, which is making sure that Singapore has the right team to take us forward in uncertain times. I think the answer for us as the Workers' Party is very simple. We just invite voters to actually look at our track record in Parliament. If you guys remember, when we held GE2020, we literally had just come out of, I think it was phase 2. I can't remember the various different terms of the COVID times. That year we had an unprecedented number of budgets, and the Workers' Party had elected members of Parliament, at the time, both before and after GE 2020. But if you look at what we actually did, our proposals and the approach that we took in Parliament, we always take a responsible approach. We look at whatever the government is suggesting, the new proposals that they're putting out. We look at whether we believe that these proposals are best for Singapore. If they are best for Singapore, especially in uncertain times, we support them. Otherwise, we feel that actually this needs more refinement, or we disagree with this, we will also speak up. And I think this is where, I think voters can see very clearly for ourselves, the track record. The Workers' Party works for Singapore. We work for what is best for Singaporeans, especially in uncertain times. And again, I'll just bring you back to COVID. There's nothing more uncertain than, I think a lot of people have forgotten, how terrifying it was. At the time, especially for me, it brings back lots of terrible memories as well, because, I was also in the early stages of pregnancy at the time. So that memory, I think, also has to be, I hope that people can also understand that, this is the approach that we have always taken, and this is the approach that we will continue to take.
Okay, maybe one question here.
Okay, super from I have two questions. One just even a modest swing in votes, losing 4 to 5 ministers to cabinet, which will result in a weaker government. That will not be possible in this sourcing question. What would be your response to that? And second, you have talked about a few policies to strengthen Singapore in this time, and it seems to be more domestic facing, most of it. Can you elaborate a little bit more on whether there's any proposal on foreign policy plans? Thank you.
Okay, I'll take the first and the last question. The point about potentially weaker government. What is the definition of a weak government? A weak government means that you don't have a majority in Parliament and you have to work with coalition partners in order to advance policies, advance legislation. There's no chance that will happen in this election. If you look at the historical pattern of opposition MPs voted into the Parliament, there's not been more than 6 or 10 opposition MPs being voted in at any point of time. That's 10% of the Parliament. You need 50% plus 1 seat in order to be able to change just a simple legislation. A simple majority is just needed to change legislation. And the PAP is not short of that at all. So there's no risk that the PAP would end up with a weak government. In fact, what we are worried about is that the PAP has too much power. There's too much power centralized in the PAP, and that will cause the rest of us Singaporeans, to not be able to have that bargaining power with the government, because everything the government says they want to do, it will be done. And we don't want that for Singapore. So that's why we are taking this approach, and that's why we are contesting in this election, why we are putting forward good candidates, because we want these candidates, these MPs, with potential MPs, to be able to come up with alternative ideas that are not subject to the PAP whip, and that they can be able to speak freely according to what they feel is important, according to their consciences, and to be able to advance policy that way. On the question about foreign policy, we acknowledge that is in a very uncertain and changing world. Foreign policy is not something that is an esoteric question or something that the only people in the elites of society talk about. Foreign policy is something that all Singaporeans should talk about, which is why we felt that the PAP's approach of keeping foreign policy very much an elite institution is not fit for purpose moving forward. We have asked for more discussion about foreign policy with average Singaporeans in schools to explain the strategic interest that Singapore has. Because if you look at some of the opinion polls, it may not be apparent that everybody is on board and rowing in the same direction when it comes to foreign policy. And it's important for the government and for society to have this national conversation about foreign policy, about defense policy, because it is something that affects all of us. And that's why we have proposed in our Section 5, we created a whole section in our manifesto on security and geopolitics, precisely because we acknowledge that this is a very important topic that we need for Singapore.
I'll only add very quickly an implicit assumption in the question, which is that a monolithic set of policies proposed by one voice is necessarily going to be best for ensuring the resilience of our workforce and the adaptability of our businesses for facing crisis? Or do you think that what is ultimately needed is a diversity of ideas and opinions, which, to be clear, if that is reflected in the poll numbers, reflect what Singaporeans actually want, that will actually position us to handle crisis better?
Hi, I'm Fifa from CNA. We know that cost of living is always a hot topic, more so in today's climate. And so, in the face of rising cost of living, geopolitical and geoeconomic uncertainty, how does this Workers' Party's manifesto this year reflect the urgency of these challenges? And my second question is also, you talked about how the manifesto has grown with you over the years. We've talked about how there were proposals that eventually taken up by the government. With this year's manifesto, if re-elected, how quickly will you move to push these ideas forward and maintain momentum amid changing economic and political situation?
Okay, just a quick response to this. So the importance of the cost of living, which has been repeatedly emphasized to us by Singaporeans of all stripes in our walkabouts, in our community engagement sessions, is simply reflected in the fact that it's in chapter 1 of our manifesto, and also one of the bulkiest chapters in the manifesto. So we take this extremely seriously. The ideas that we propose there, as was mentioned earlier, some of them are refinements of policy positions we've had before, but many of them are others that we raised over the course of our past 5 years in Parliament. And that's important to know, that we don't just propose policies in the context of a manifesto that comes out every 5 years. We have been actively engaging in that conversation over the course of the prior 5 years.
I think regarding your question about when we intend to push forward these ideas, firstly, it will depend on whether or not we can get into Parliament to be able to push those ideas. And that's where the ball is in the court of Singaporeans from next week onwards, that whether or not they are prepared to have more credible, rational, responsible opposition MPs in Parliament so that we can be able to advance these policies in Parliament. So the answer to your question is that we will start right away as soon as we are able to have the opportunity given by Singaporeans to be able to push these policies forward. Okay, maybe behind that.
Hi, Julie from SCMP. So my question is regarding the social media post that the WP put up yesterday. So the party has highlighted 15 policy proposals that was later adopted by the government. So, but critics have long labelled the party as being PAP-like. So how does the party draw the line between constructive opposition and policy conversions? And what distinguishes your policy proposals from the ruling parties?
Okay, so just to be clear, when we put forward our policy proposals, we don't take reference from what the PAP does and say that, okay, let's make a different policy from what the PAP does. What we do is, firstly, we listen to our constituents on the ground, and that's the benefit of having elected MPs. Elected MPs are able to listen to their constituents week in, week out during Meet the People sessions, during house visits. We hear the feedback and inputs from our residents, and from there, we can make an assessment about whether or not the current policies have gaps, and if there are gaps, then we'll put forward the policy proposals. And if they happen to align with the PAPs, well, we make no apologies for that. And what you would have discovered is that on quite a number of our policies, for example, our redundancy insurance policy, which we had pushed for many years, you see them being resurfaced by Labour MPs after a while, and somehow it makes it in its way into PAP policy. So I don't make any apologies for having similarities with the PAP, and I think we in many ways we are leading the PAP in many of these policies. But really, it's not a contest about who is first and who is second. What is more important is that are the policies fit for Singapore? Are the policies benefiting our residents, benefiting Singaporeans as a whole, and benefiting Singaporeans in the long term? So we don't just look at the immediate term. An example is what my colleague James mentioned just now about our redundancy insurance scheme. We had proposed that the scheme will be funded by workers and employers in equal measure as an insurance scheme. So the workers and employers will pay into premiums into a redundancy insurance scheme. And when they get retrenched, then they can draw down from that. The PAP scheme involves just taxpayer dollars in terms of funding the unemployment benefits that they are giving out. Well, we're not saying that that's necessarily always wrong, but it's just to illustrate that our policies look at a long term as well. We're not just looking at giving out short-term handouts, but we're looking at a long-term sustainability of many of our proposals. Yeah.
Reversals or a little bit of turns in terms of policy this time around compared to the last manifesto?
Well, I mean, all manifestos are living documents. They are not. Okay, the question was whether or not there are changes and reversals in the policies. All manifesto policies, the manifesto is always a living document, and we are not wedded to any of the ideas inside there. As long as we feel that the policies are still relevant to the people on the ground and to our constituents, we will continue to push for that. But once we find that the policies are no longer needed, we are prepared to change it. So we're not wedded to any particular policy, and I think we have been consistent throughout that, throughout the years on that. Yeah, I think.
Hi, from Mothership. So youth seems to be a very key aspect in your 2025 manifesto, and it highlights proposals such as lowering the age for singles to apply for PTO and lowering the age of voting. So how will the WP plan to connect with youth on the ground, taking these ideas and connecting with them on the ground beyond just social media, where in this environment social media is king, let's say?
Okay, you want to take it?
Oh, me? Okay. So for starters, I think that it is important to understand that the ideas that were proposed that align with the more youthful demographic are not necessarily hatched from, as Gerald suggested, from just our heads. They were policies that were raised to us by the youth. And beyond the kind of slightly more bread and butter ones that you mentioned, things like the lowering the age of voting and so on, there are others that are much more long run, but matter a lot more for those of us that have a longer runway, if you will. And this includes things like environmental sustainability initiatives, for which the manifesto has an abundance of policies along those lines. So I think it's important to understand the process by which these ideas bubble up to the surface, which is a combination of being informed by feedback we receive from the youth, but at the same time applying our layer of expertise to refine these so that they truly are something that fit into the broader ecosystem of policies that are important for Singapore.
Sorry, just to add on to that, I think your question earlier was about social media. Obviously that is quite a major platform through which we do communicate many of our ideas, especially for younger people. Social media platforms are, something that they are a lot more engaged with, with these mobile phones in everyone's pockets. But I think, I think just to riff off some of the ideas that Gerald mentioned earlier, because, many of us actually have been, were MPs in the previous term. So that in itself it kind of, again, brings home the message of why having elected opposition MPs or being elected into parliament makes a difference, because we do have all these various different platforms through which we can engage with Singaporeans across the spectrum, not just younger Singaporeans, but Singaporeans from all walks of life, different segments. So it gives us more opportunities and more platforms to be able to do that beyond social media. Just because I think yes, social media is important, but at the same time, again, in the name of inclusivity, we also have to realize that there are a lot of people for whom, not just people who are elderly, but even persons with disabilities. Sometimes we also have to be aware that how we communicate with them, how we engage with them, is also important, and we always try and have that at the back of our heads.
Thanks for the question. So, I think it's important to recognize that, of course, the world tariff situation is constantly evolving. The US administration is quite mercurial. So, to that extent, it is, while it's true that we are entering a period of greater policy uncertainty, I don't think it's baked into the cake that we will definitely be going into massively hard times. That remains to be seen. Now, I think I mentioned earlier on that I framed some of our policy proposals in terms of how they would help Singaporeans to cater to the ongoing trade tensions. But at the same time, previously the Workers' Party had released a statement on how we can do that. I'll just reiterate one point, for instance, and I think that's important, and that is that Singapore, as a small player in the global system, it is absolutely imperative that we work within a broader coalition of trade partners and trade blocs. So this includes ASEAN, obviously, in the first instance, but we are, of course, members of many other ones. We are members of, for instance, the CPTPP, and that is another avenue by which we can leverage off and multiply the effects of what we care about as a small trading nation to ensure the resilience of our economy in the face of these issues. I will only add that, of course, we don't know what the committee will ultimately propose. We look forward, if we are given the opportunity, to be able to scrutinize and debate these issues in the context of Parliament, because it's absolutely important that this kind of decisions are not made without accountability, but rather with feedback that comes from perspective across the entire political spectrum.
And just to add to that, I think it's important as we try and take our country forward, not to only focus on the negatives when it comes to these tariff issues, trade wars, because in every crisis there will always be opportunities that we can take advantage of, and we must be nimble and we must be able to make a shift quickly in policies in order to take advantage of opportunities. In the last sitting of Parliament, I was asking the Prime Minister whether or not there are opportunities in this crisis, whether or not, for example, we can take advantage of the differential tariffs that are applied to different countries to be able to go forward and go into have certain industries go into the US market because they would be subject to lower tariffs than some of the other countries. And so these are just some of the examples of how I think we need to have fresh thinking in how we approach even things like our trade policies. And we cannot always be in a state of fear or in a state of uncertainty when Singaporeans are looking to the government to be able to propose policies that would actually take us out. And it's not just about applying subsidies or giving assistance, but rethinking the way we do things. And I think that's where it's not the solutions are not going to come necessarily from us even. It's going to come from a more open society where people can step forward and have the confidence to offer their ideas without getting hammered down. And I think that's the society that we want to try and advance in Singapore. Regarding the question about election strategy, I think Mr. Pritam Singh and Ms. Lim will be here later on, and so you can ask them those questions after that. Maybe I'll take a question over here.
Go ahead, there's no mic.
Okay, just a quick one. It's not quite related to the manifesto, but then we see that the three of you here, especially Jared, you're sitting right center to share the manifesto. Instead of Pritam Singh and also Sylvia, who is the chairman and also the secretary, is this part of the strategy for the execution plan that you will be one of the key persons helm the entire key?
Well, you should have asked me that 3 elections ago, because I was launching the manifesto 3 elections ago as well. No, I've been given the task to head the policy research team. And so the policy research team, together, which included Ru and James, and many volunteers who are helping us, were involved in putting together the manifesto based on inputs from the ground, from our other MPs and from the CEC members. And so that's why we are fronting this today, because it's important that the authors of the document are also here to be able to answer the questions on it. Yeah. Okay. Question?
Representing from Malaysians, Mediacorp. under one of the points in Section 5 about recognizing the state of Palestine, maybe my question, as you can see here, WP stands to formally recognize the state of Palestine before the two-state solution. But domestically, where does WP stand in this matter? Because we can see over the past few weeks there have been incidents of such topic which bring question about our social condition. So, yeah.
Okay, so on the question on Palestine, we put forward this proposal. I know it's not really a common thing to be putting a proposal on a specific country. We have proposals on, for example, Myanmar as well. But on the issue of Palestine, we put that proposal forward because we felt that this is a very important issue for a lot of Singaporeans. And particularly since the October 23rd attacks on Israel and what happened after that. And so it's important for us to put forward this position which we feel would help to advance this whole peace process. And why do I say that? There have been, in recent months, quite a number of countries, including Western countries, who have started to recognize Palestine as a state. Many countries recognize the Palestinian Authority, but not all the countries recognize Palestine as a state. And we felt that it's important for us to put forward this position because we feel that it would advance the peace process on a more equal keel, where you have two states negotiating with each other instead of one state negotiating with a non-state actor. And I actually posed this question in Parliament as well to the Foreign Minister. And if my memory serves me right, I think he didn't disagree with the position. What the government's position was is that they want to wait until the conditions on the ground are suitable, where there's a viable government in Palestine before they will recognize it as a state. But I think we might be in a catch-22 situation right now. If there's no recognition of Palestine as a state, how are they going to be able to negotiate with another state on very thorny issues that need to be sorted out before the peace process can be taken forward? So that's a very brief answer to that. And but I think it's important that there is a conversation on this in Singapore as well, and we hope that this would also spark some more discussions on it. And what we want to see is mature discussions where Singaporeans are not just concerned about issues that are in a faraway land, but they are concerned about our national interests as well. We have national interests as Singaporeans in this issue, and we need to pay attention to that as well. Okay. Peting?
There is a point raised in the manifesto about the house price to income ratio. I just wanted to understand how do you arrive at this 3.0 figure, and what is the current
Oh, to be clear, it's not that we pointed to 3.0. We want a target that is closer to 3 rather than what we believe it currently is. At the moment, depending on the metric and what your metric for income is closer to 4. The government has indicated, the government has itself shifted in terms of precisely how it wishes to measure affordability, appealing more to whether you can afford it out of your monthly mortgage payments in your CPF. We are a little concerned about that because ultimately paying out something that is highly unaffordable out of your retirement income will erode your ability to retire thereafter. So we believe that we want to target the issue at the source, which is more about excessively inflated asset prices in the form of HDB. But of course, as I mentioned, we are also cognizant of the fact that there is an inherent tension between those that want to cash out, and that is why one of our proposals is about how you can do so, effect this transition in as smooth a manner as possible with a universal lease buyback scheme.